And now we're live.
Okay.
Well, you do the intro this time.
I don't even think I remember what it is. Welcome to the... oh, yeah, that's what it is. Welcome to What the Bleep with Ian and Ryan and our special guest today, Jeff Robbins.
Hey.
Welcome, Jeff.
Coming to you live from Longmont Public Media. I like doing a plug.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we got to keep the house happy.
Yeah. They need their cut.
Right. Well, a cut of nothing, but we're preparing for the future.
Yeah.
That's right.
There you go.
So what brings us in today? We had a pretty cheery topic.
Well, we talked towards the end of our last session, and something made me think about fear and naming that as a topic, and you were all about it, and here we are. Coincidentally, I had lunch with Jeff directly after the recording of that podcast, and shared about what we did and this idea of fear. And I think, if I remember correctly, Jeff's comment to me was, "Oh yeah, I know a little something about fear."
Yeah.
Jeff, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, Jeff Robbins. I've been doing men's work for 35 years, I guess, something like that. So, we'll probably discover more about me later. But the idea was, and we talked about this as far as fear, is like, I just knew that there was something missing in my life, and it was peace and connection. Peace and connection is what I was missing. And so I found this men's group, in 1990, and saw what I call truth with a big T. It's not a religious thing, but I just saw men treating and being with one another in a way that I just never expected. I didn't know existed. I didn't know could exist. And I was like, oh, I'm on to something here, and we'll get into it. But it scared the crap out of me. So
they don't teach that in the school of society.
Yeah,
that's for certain.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit during that meeting. Was like, I've learned to, I have reasons for deep-seated fear, but I've also learned that for me, fear is like a road sign, that there's something exciting just around the bend. And if I can just suspend judgment for a while, I'll find out what it is. And so, there's fear like, I'm going to die fear. I should run.
Yeah.
And then a lot of fear, for me, was self-generated. And so that's, I just didn't want to live in fear anymore, and I'd been trying. So I was 30 when I did this, 29. And I was like, man, I'm just tired of being afraid all the time.
Yeah.
And so we can talk about the genesis of that and why I was afraid and how it showed up in my life and stuff. So that's a little bit about me.
How did you two meet? Because you're old friends.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess we could say old friends now.
Yeah.
It's been a few
didn't
years.
mean to say like age there. You know what I mean? Because I was born in 1990. I didn't want to bring that up. But I figured I should,
That's
You are the young boy in the
I
room.
put my diaper on this morning.
So we met, I don't actually remember how many years ago now.
Probably 10 years
Has
ago.
it been that long?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This same organization that Jeff's talking about, it's called the Mankind Project. In 2011, a man in my life introduced me to it. I went through the weekend, it's an initiatory weekend, and started to explore the world of men's work and my own evolution and my healing journey. And after the initial experience of that weekend, I'd gotten involved in studying groups, but the real significance for me was being a participant in leading these weekends, helping lead them. And so I've been doing that pretty much from the beginning. And then Jeff moved to Colorado about 10 years ago, connected in with the community, and I'm trying to remember now when we first met, but what I do remember is it was almost like an immediate like connection. Like it was like, oh,
Yeah.
like we got each other.
Yeah.
And that connection's been present ever since and grown ever since.
I think it was I walked into a leader body meeting.
Was it a leader body meeting?
Yeah. And
Okay.
I said, I said, I like things messy. I think those were our first.
That might have been, yeah.
Topics.
We had a whole thing about getting messy. That's right. I do remember that.
Yeah.
That's an exciting statement.
Yeah.
You know, I loved what you said about suspending judgment.
Yeah.
That really struck me.
Yeah.
Because I feel that when I look at my life and the things that have stopped me from growing, it was my own idea of what would happen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as I've grown, I've found that life didn't do anything like I thought it would. And it's amazing how powerful that feeling is that stopped me.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
stopped me from taking the leap, stopped me from putting myself out there.
Yeah.
Because I swore that I knew what would happen.
Yep.
You know, I thought I would fail. I thought people wouldn't love me. I thought I would expose myself and be considered weak. I'd lose affection and respect. All, the list goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
And that's the other thing that really resonated for me was this idea of like self-generated, how much of the fear comes from what we're making up instead of reality.
Yeah.
Where do you think all that comes from?
So I think for me, I've been around this for a while. So I think a lot of times what happens in life, if you think about a little baby, and they can they can go from laughing to crying to screaming to laughing, like instantaneously. They're just these golden little beings that have everything available to them at all times. And as we grow, pain happens to us, and it often happens to us by the people that are caring for us, and which is when I'll just speak about myself. When I was 3 years old, that was my mom and dad, and so when pain happens, that it's such a shock to that little perfect being, which is, I don't mean this in a religious sense, which is all soul, that the ego comes in and says, whoa, we're in danger. Right? And I call it the scene of the crime. The ego cuts a deal with the soul. And the ego says, hey, you know what? We're in danger. I got a plan, but you got to kind of give up this whole, I'm just a being thing, because that's dangerous. Because we're a danger if you're just like in your emotions all the time, and feeling all the time,
vulnerable,
and open and vulnerable. It's like we just got hurt.
It's like uncontrolled fire,
right? So the ego comes in and cuts a deal, and that works for a while, for that time, whether you're 3, you're 7 or 8. But the ego doesn't relinquish back to the soul. The ego's like, oh, I kind of dig it here, and so I'm gonna start my monkey wheels going all the time, and be on guard all the time, and watch this and protect this little helpless soul. And so that's, for me, when I say suspend judgment, I'm saying suspending my ego and just allowing me to be that soul piece, and just hold space for whatever's happening in my life in that time, like the best sip of coffee, right? Not just a sip of coffee, like, oh, how delicious is this sip? And it allows me to stop all that chatter and just be. And that was a really big process for me in dealing with fear, which is our topic, right? Because I was sexually abused when I was a toddler, 2 or 3 years old. I don't know the time. All I remember is that you're too young, but we used to have little leather white baby shoes, right? And they used to actually, when you got older, they would dip them in silver or something.
Bronze. I think they were bronze. Yeah.
But I remember seeing my little white baby shoes. So, my feet were this big. So I was 2 or 3 years old and I was raped and it wasn't good. But, and I, he told me, hey, we lived in a different country at this time. And so in French, he's like, hey, if you tell anybody, I'll kill you and I'll kill your family, right? Which is typical for those folks.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I had this secret at 3. I mean, I remember going home and putting my little bloody underpants in the, in the trash and hiding them in the trash. So I couldn't talk to anybody about this. And so my ego came in. It's like, all right, first and foremost, you're going to forget everything about this.
Mm-hmm. It's first line of defense.
Yeah, first line.
locked it away.
It was wiped off. Yeah, I had no recollection of it after a little while, right? After my body healed and stuff, until I was 30. And I knew something was wrong because I had this fear. So my ego had stepped in and said, stop. I'm going to save your ass, which he did. And I'm so thankful that he did, But I was so wounded underneath that I had this fear always going. I mean, it wasn't fear, it was terror. I had terror underneath because I knew I wasn't safe, that the world was not safe.
Did that just manifest in every experience you had?
Yeah.
Did you know what that fear was from?
No.
How did it manifest in your body?
I mean, so like I was a lifelong insomniac. So I was an insomniac at this happened in the dark.
Yeah.
And so,
Wow.
we used to have these Encyclopedia Britannica.
The collection.
The encyclopedias. And I had a junior set. And I read the whole thing.
Wow.
Cover to cover twice as an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. So if you want to play Trivial Pursuit with 1950s information,
I was going to say, you
I
must
kick
have
ass.
had insomnia because I get about 5 sentences into an encyclopedia and I'm asleep.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I remember this is how bad it was. It was like, my sister, I have 3 older sisters, and they would kind of make fun of me that I was afraid of the dark, and my dad was kind of, he was a typical 60s, 70s father. He's a wonderful guy. I mean, I loved him dearly, but he was also like, kid, you're 16. And I remember having a nightlight, and I would huddle around the nightlight when I was 16 years old.
Yeah.
I was afraid of the dark when I was 40, and I had a family, and I'd fall asleep in front of the TV, and I'd have to turn the TV off and walk upstairs in my own house that I owned, and it just scared the shit out of me. So
that fear was directly translated to darkness, and darkness carried the sense of you of like foreboding.
Yep.
And there was no direct memory of
there was
the initial trauma.
I literally thought I was crazy because I couldn't remember.
You were this way, but you had no idea why you were this way.
Right. So I was a pretty hardened drug addict by the time I was 12, just trying to self-medicate. I had a noose around my neck and literally a foot off my desk when I was 14. And my mom called up and said, dinner. And I hadn't realized that my mom would find my body. And my mom and dad weren't the problem. I mean, they were typical, normal, loving folks. People talk about young kids committing suicide and that it's a rash thing, and it was for me. I was just so tired of being terrorized.
Tired.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was standing on the wall every day, and I didn't know why. And so, so that was, that was the apex of being out of control. Like, my ego clamping everything down so tight that I couldn't get a glimpse of what was, and my soul just crying.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I really believe in that split between ego and soul. Personally, I've lived it. So
Right.
Thank
And
you.
I honestly believe that's probably true for my judgment is it's all human beings,
Yeah.
but in varying degrees.
yeah,
And that, unfortunately, I think for most people, they don't ever get even a glimpse of awareness around that
Yeah.
fact that that's playing out.
yeah,
And so now, with this, brings us kind of back to this concept of like, and so if that's true,
Yeah.
if my belief is true,
yeah,
then that suggests that pretty much all humans are operating in an unconscious sphere
yeah,
relative to something that's transpired in their life that's influencing how they show up day to day in relationship in the world,
yeah.
and it just continues and perpetuates.
Yeah, and we as a society in general don't have a way to. I mean, that's why we're involved with the Mankind Project. Is that there's no way to approach that and to create some healing around that. Because the reality is Ryan, you've made decisions, right? Conscious or unconscious, and what happens for all of us is that like that decision works until it stops working. But most people never go back in and say, well, what's the cause of this? They're pointing a finger. It must be my partner, or it must be my boss, or it must be, this if I could just get a job or have enough money. But that's that whole three fingers pointing back at you when you're pointing a finger. And so the idea is like, one of the ways I'll just use me. It's like I had this decision and that worked until I was 14. And then I did this and that worked until I was 21. And I did that and that worked until I was 30, right? But I had the opportunity to change, but a lot of people stay stuck. And they just stay in this, fear-based life. And they don't know that you can talk your way out of this, that you can be in a relationship with people.
Well, and it's somebody in my life has often talked about it, the idea of not being conscious of this is a metaphor in a similar way of like looking at fish, like they don't realize they're in water.
Right, exactly.
And so everything that's happening around us is there and happening, but we aren't capable of conceiving it at all. And that is why it perpetuates. It also is interesting, like I just realized like, oh, this kind of connects back to the last conversation about generational trauma, which is, well, if we're unconscious of it, but we're perpetuating it, and now we have children, and that fear is still alive in us, and now we're literally like teaching the baby, which you spoke of in the beginning, Jeff, this pristine baby, to already be in fear, even if it didn't have a traumatic experience.
Well, yeah.
And then life is destined to create some kind of pain. And so then we're adding this generational, cultural fear compounded by a life experience that creates pain and some aspect of trauma. And now we're just in this cycle.
Yeah. I mean, if you go ahead if you want.
Well, it's powerful when you talk about how we, in our unknowing of our own fear, project it.
Yep.
A lot of those are our triggers.
Yep.
And what I've noticed is it's so difficult to deal with it because when I'm afraid of something and unaware of it, I will react to certain stimuli violently.
Totally.
Whether it's emotionally, a lot of it's physical too. Not with me, but in society.
Well, can I pause you for a second? Because there's something really important that you just said that I'm trying to really embody. You said I will react, making this statement about it's all of you that's doing this. And the piece that I'm really working with is separating out, like, it's not me. It's this part of me that's protecting me. Or what Jeff was talking about is that's your ego, but not Ryan as the being.
Cultivating awareness.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is so I've struggled with a lot of insecurity in life,
Yeah.
like debilitating insecurity. You know, I started losing my hair when I was really young. You know, I was
Yep.
really overweight when I was a child. I was bullied as a child. You know, I was embarrassed to take my shirt off at the pool, you know,
Yep.
and it was like those field trips to the pool were a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yep.
But in more adult relationships, I've seen that when I react from an unconscious fear, I will see it and find it in what people are saying to me, even when it's not there.
Absolutely.
And then when I react that way, it creates this non-item stop. It could create a fight. But what I've seen is that my fear will then trigger someone else's fear.
Absolutely.
And if they're not aware of where that comes from, then it just becomes this horrible feeling.
Yep.
And you don't know exactly why, but everything feels wrong. And I look for a reason. And it's so quick to be able to assign, well, it's because of that, or it's because of that.
Sure, yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
it's like
because-
it creates this
Totally.
horrible
Now-
reverberation.
Yeah.
Now overlay that into an intimate relationship.
and right, and it's two people doing it,
Right.
right? So the reality is we get, I look at it like we have pain. Buddha said to be born is to be born into 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows. And most of us were taught, because this is a perpetrator-victim type society, that if I have pain, I deserved it, or
wow.
and there's a reason why I had it, or I must have screwed up.
It's my fault.
Little boys
Yeah.
and girls do that a
my
lot,
fault.
right?
Yeah.
Parents get divorced, and the kids.
Well, and they
the
have to
must be
6-year-old
me.
They
blame-
have to do that because
Right.
of the power dynamic
Sure,
between
absolutely.
little children and adults, and they can't. The adults can't be wrong.
Yep.
So the only
So what happens is this pain then becomes this burden, right? Like how you were treated as a child, and the people associate, oh, that must be me, and so what they do is they pick up that pain and they put it on like a shirt every day, and they don't know they have a choice to pick it up and put it on, or to go, oh, that's pain, and it's not necessarily mine. I experience that pain, but I don't have to pick up that pain
Yeah.
every single day.
Yeah.
It's like, because otherwise what you said is then that pain, that's the filter that I see the world through. That's my rose-colored glasses. And I'm looking to make sure so I don't feel dopey. I'm going to create that pain so it proves to me that this is definitely my pain. This is my stuff.
Right.
And that's the whole idea about personal growth that I really enjoy, is that if we can take time to stop, suspend judgment, look at our fear from the pain that we had, and then decide, oh man, this isn't serving me any longer. Maybe I ought to just, I get it. It's my experience, but I don't have to re-experience it every day.
Yeah.
I don't have to re-traumatize myself every day.
Something I hear in there is a question. If you for everyone listening, if you have something that's stopping you right now, what are you afraid of? Ask yourself that. And be honest. What are you afraid of? And then ask yourself, why?
Yeah.
That was a powerful place for me to start, because I didn't know why I was afraid all the time until I started wondering.
Well,
Yes,
and that's I love the simplicity of that, because that really is achieving what Jeff's been talking about in my words, which is like presence, like being in presence. And so how do we interrupt that unconscious pattern of reaction? And your suggestion is if we can notice that we're experiencing fear, and maybe even connect that to pain, and we're asking the question why, all of a sudden our perspective shifts, our awareness shifts. We're no longer unconscious about what's happening. We're now in conscious awareness. And that's, to me, like how this is going to have any chance of being different.
Yeah.
You ever hear the parable of the monk and the apprentice that go on a 1,000-mile journey?
go for it.
Do you mind if I tell this
No.
story? My dad told me this, and it was it shifted the way I looked at the world. It goes that a monk was about to hand over the reins to his apprentice. And he said, your final test is to go on this 1,000-mile journey with me. And everyone listening, there's probably a million different versions of this story. Thank you for bearing with me. This is the one I remember. So the old monk, when they're on the precipice of leaving, he turns to his apprentice and he says, if you're going to do this with me, you have to promise me one thing. Along this whole journey, you will not lift a single finger to do any work. The apprentice was like, all right, easy, no problem, let's go.
Cool.
And
This is my kind of journey.
yeah. And about 10 feet out of the door, they come upon a small home, and this elderly woman is struggling to carry a large sack of rice up a ladder into the storeroom. And the young apprentice goes, oh, I should go help her, but I'm not going to lift a finger. And before he finishes the thought, the old monk is rushing down to the woman, grabs the sack of rice from her, and carries it up the ladder for her. Then comes back and says, let's go. And they continue and finish the whole journey. And the young monk is furious. He said, this old master is a liar. He lied to me. He made me promise this. And he went and did work right away. And he turns to him and says, you are a liar. And the old monk says, what are you on about? And the young monk says, that sack of rice you helped the woman with. And the old monk goes, oh, wow. You know, I carried that sack of rice about 10 feet. You've been carrying it for over 1,000 miles.
Yeah. Yep. There you go.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do over and over and
That's
over
like
again.
the self-generation bit. You
Yeah.
know, I have my ability to convince myself I'm right is honed into a razor
Dude,
edge.
I'm telling you what. Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
it's like, I swear that I know what people think of me.
Yeah.
And this gives me a sense of righteousness
Yep.
to act out of my fear.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes it's almost like the fear becomes my idea of my protection.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Well, and it's self-generating. That's the thing that's insidious about this and the way that our ego works. It's like, it's a loop that is so hard to, one, even witness, and then two, to interrupt or to eventually break because of how, I guess, our brains and our nervous systems are wired.
Well, and if you think about it, if this is all happening internally and it's you're self-generating a preconceived notion of yourself and your experience in life, there's no one to argue. So, one of my biggest tools throughout my life has been listening to myself talk.
Yeah.
And if I hear myself saying something over and over again, I just have to say stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. What's going on here? Because otherwise I'll just get stuck in a loop. I don't know about y'all, but I'll just like
100%.
Oh, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I never ruminate.
No.
I didn't ruminate for the first 25 years of my life and make myself sick. No way.
So that's that, that chance to suspend judgment and just stop and think. And, I believe it's why meditation works. It's why prayer works is because you're stopping, and you're putting your attention somewhere else or just, or hitting the pause button on the monkey chatter.
Well, I love that about the 3-finger back when you point a finger.
Yeah.
Because I think about when I'm driving to work every day and the road rage that I desperately try not to get. But so often I've, especially lately in my life, I've caught myself, I get cut off and I say, oh, that fucking asshole.
I
And
thought you weren't
feel
going to use that language so we could record.
Sorry, Longmont Public Media will no longer host this before 10 p.m. I corrupted the episode.
You
But
big poopy butt.
Yeah.
That's what you said.
you meanie.
That sounds familiar.
So,
Bet it does.
but I've been realizing how that makes me feel. My body is now tense. My stomach hurts.
Yeah.
My shoulders are tight, and I have murder on my mind. And then that doesn't go away for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And then it happens again the next day. And then all of a sudden, by the end of the week, I can't even get home without feeling sleepy, because my body is just racked with anger and exhaustion.
Yep.
And I don't even know why they cut me off. Yeah. They could have been on the way to the hospital. They could have just had a loved one die.
Or they never saw you, and it was just sheer,
totally honest.
Yeah, totally
but here
honest.
I am going, they did that to me.
Right, that's that victim mentality, right? Yep. Yeah, it's amazing.
It's insidious.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Anger is exhausting.
Well, it is, but there's also chemical neurological reasons. People get addicted to it. It's one of the reasons I believe there's certain media companies out there that just deal in fear and anger, and people cannot turn their TVs off, and because they're getting those neurotransmitters, they're getting the endorphins, and it's like, and they're getting dopamine hits, and it's just it's addictive.
Well, and self-medication,
Yeah.
that is so prevalent. I went to rehab for alcohol.
Yep.
And I used alcohol so that I could sleep at night.
Yep.
Because I struggled with that too. I struggled with nightmares.
Yep.
And that response to the fear almost gives, it gave me a sense of purpose.
Yep.
It justified my behaviors to self-medicate. And I found one of the points that scared me in my life was I realized that I was creating situations in my life. I was behaving in a way that would scare me. I would scare myself by hurting myself so that I could feel like I had a reason then to medicate more.
Right, self-perpetuating.
Yep.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's terrifying. It's like, oh my gosh.
We have to validate from the outside what's on the inside. It's just how we're wired, and so it's just coming to terms with. Again, if we can look at this fear, since we're talking about that, and heal those sources, and I can become peaceful and generative and loving and attentive, right? Then, this is one of the cool things about being my age, then I look for things outside to create that.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the joys of getting older is I can put down a lot of that angst. If I've learned, there's a lot of nasty old men out there.
It's way easier said than done.
Right. Yeah. But it takes work, and it takes that willingness to challenge yourself to look at that ego, soul split and go, wow, I was really hurt, and dive into that pain and just experience it finally. And then that, for me, gave me the ability to move on into my life. I wasn't held hostage by my sexual abuse any longer. And that guy got enough of me. It was like, so I get to experience my life now. And I think that, we talk about, we've been kind of talking about this as singular events, but it's multiple events. It's like 8 different things that will happen to you, 10 different things as you're growing up, right? And so it's like, in essence, lining up all those demons and all those splits inside of us and say, okay, I'm going to look at this one. Okay, it's hard, but I'm going in and I'm going to look at this one. Then I'm going to go and look at this one. But each time I do that, I call it kitchen work. It's like cleaning out the stove of the ash. There's just more room for light and joy and peace. And if I'm too afraid to look at that stuff because I think I'll get lost, which is a big thing for men. Men think I can't go to my anger because my dad beat me up every day.
Yeah, we're trained not to.
And so it's like, I can't go there because, well, it's like, you're not your dad, number one, right? But everybody, so many men are like, I'll lose myself if I go into my pain or my anger or
sadness,
my grief. I'll get lost in there. And I think that's the lie that we tell ourselves because we were lost at one point in time in there. But the reality is we have our faculties, and we, hopefully, like with our men's groups.
I was actually going to speak to that.
Yeah, you're sitting in group. You got 8 sets of eyes and ears that have your back, you know,
Right.
and yeah.
Because it's not. Well, I mean, I love what you're saying, but in some ways it's a little bit of a oversimplification because
We
there's
only have an
very
hour, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we could do multiple parts.
Okay.
We
Maybe
got all the time.
this could be like a
We got
10-parter.
nothing but time. Yeah. No reason to rush.
What I was sitting with in hearing that is, and there's my judgment, I own this. There's very few men who are actually going to be able to sit down on their own and take a look at the original source of wounding and what it generated for them and the cost that it's created and do all that on their own. Like that just...
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's why therapy exists and the thousands of other ways to help facilitate healing.
And there was... I didn't want to give you the idea that I was doing that alone. Absolutely.
Right.
I didn't have the facilities to do that. So I found it through being in a men's group and having men that will truly hear and hold space for me no matter where I go or what I do.
Right.
Because I didn't have the courage to do it myself. I got a long ways. I was a very high functioning addict. You know, I did taekwondo, I was a fighter, I was 4-time national champion because I was getting all this anger out. I didn't know why, but so I intuitively found ways to get better, but I was still...
But that was like superficial, essentially.
Terrified. But it was allowing me to. It was allowing me to live and to succeed. But at my core, I was still this terrified little 3-year-old boy.
Right.
I wanted to ask, what happened when you first felt that wall inside you start to crack?
Yeah. Yeah, I wept. You know, I was just so. You know, I did a lot of. I was angry all the time. You know, I would have fights in my head like constantly, all the time.
Totally.
You know, and I would just make up scenarios all the time, and I was able to put that down. And what was under that anger and rage was just grief.
Yeah.
And I was able to just, I mean, with my guys, I talk about crying a river of tears and gallons of snot, you know, and I did it over and over again because, I mean, how much, you know, one, that thing happened, and 2, I'd been holding it in and it had been changing my life for 30 years plus. So there was all these ramifications of bobbing in the wake of that abuse for a half of a lifetime. And then getting that out, then that's what I was talking about with my bros. It's like then all of a sudden this light comes in, and I was so lucky that I did that. You know, as my babies were being born, and I could parent in a different way. I did it young enough that you know. It was, you know, yeah. I mean, it was. So this is how deep it was inside of me. Is like when my firstborn, when she was born, you know, I was nervous about changing her diaper because I'd read all about sexual offenders and recidivism and stuff like that, and I had no tendencies like that, but I was worried about changing my daughter's diaper. You know, I mean, that's how deep it was inside of me.
Yeah.
And I changed her diaper. I was like, screw that. That ain't me. You know, it's like, but that's how skewed my self view was. I had no confidence in myself that I wouldn't be an offender. And I think I owe that to having a loving family and stuff like that, right? You know, I mean, I just.
And when you say loving family, are you referring to your parents?
My parents.
Right.
Yeah. So. You know, and so, but that's, you know, that's that whole idea of like, you know, what comes next, you know, and my hope is that y'all who are listening is that there's, you know, don't have to spend a lifetime in pain and stay in it, that we can, you gotta move through it. You can't circumvent it. Drugs
Right.
can't do it.
Right.
Money can't do it. Porn can't do it.
Yep.
Whatever it is that the drug that you use to get around that pain, the tough part, I believe, and this is just me, is that you have to experience that at some point in time, because your body never forgets.
Yeah.
It's held, that energy is held inside of us.
The body weeps the tears we don't.
Yep, absolutely.
One way or another.
And we're meant to do that. I mean, that's the beauty of this. I mean, if you think about the grand design, I mean, we have a way of getting it comes literally right out of our face.
Yeah, they did a study on tears, and they took this. The group was they would tickle people's noses,
Yeah.
and trigger eye watering, and they tested that the water that came out of their eyes, and it was
Yeah.
mostly just saline.
Yeah.
Then they took people through a progressive journey back into what made them sad.
Yep.
And when they cried tears of emotion, they tested that, and it was like 99% toxins from the body.
I never heard about that
Crying
story.
is literally a way our body removes toxins
Yeah.
from itself.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we're designed to do this work. It's just that I believe our society keeps us, and what you were talking about last week was, the generational.
Yeah.
It's like, my great grandparents, if how they expected the best out of you, and if they gave you the quiet treatment if you didn't do it right, or they knocked you alongside the head, well, then that's what the next generation does, and it just gets passed down.
Totally.
Well, from the age 1 to 5, the human brain, when we're in our infancy like that, takes every stimulus and records it like it's normal. So it just absorbs it and then thinks that's the way the world is.
Well, and that's
Right.
what we spoke a little bit about, that concept of normalizing, our experiences, and we don't know any better at that age, so that becomes the norm. And
Yeah.
then if it's really bad, the next level is to minimize it and make it out to be not so bad as a way of surviving.
Dude, I'll tell you, we're in Boulder, right?
Yeah.
I can
well
say
close.
that. Yeah, close to Boulder. So I started a men's group at the Boulder County Jail,
Right.
and have started another men's group in a federal pen. But what was normal for these kids, like one guy, we can't speak specifically about stuff, but a good day is that he got beat with the butt of the gun, as opposed to the sight at the end of the pistol, because that would really cut. And that was their normal. And what I will tell you, what I found from being with these men on the inside is they were like, we don't know how to have a normal life, right?
How could they?
I have no reference. And they were just so hungry to go, okay, you guys are on the outside, right? I mean, most of us had checkered past, me being a drug addict and stuff.
Yeah.
They were just like, teach me the new way, because my normal was just totally screwed up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's two things that are coming to mind about all of this. The first is this idea of we spoke briefly about society and how society perpetuates, and I keep thinking about how this is like a westernized society and how we perpetuate fear and trauma, and relative to what's more and more being learned about indigenous cultures and how they operate like in completely different ways around what's traumatic, and it's brought out, and it's held in community, and it's a completely different experience, and it's not encouraged for that thing to be shoved away.
Right.
It's encouraged for it to be brought out and be shared by everyone, and it dramatically changes how our brains and our bodies process and store that experience.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, I don't have data on this, but I'm pretty sure indigenous cultures don't have the same degree of crime that like what we're used to. And I have to believe that's a direct result of what we do now relative to how community and just human beings have, for most of our experience on this planet, have actually learned to survive and evolve.
Yeah, and I am not a conspiracy theorist at all, but if you think about the power of fear and anger and what it generates. So what it generates is typically people this is just in general for our society. It generates people that are going to go do something. And when they do something, they spend money. Right, so they buy the booze, they buy the dope, they buy the new car, they buy new they buy the gun, they buy the new shop, they go shopping and buy all the new clothes. You know, and it keeps this consumerism going because a lot of people try in one way or another to buy something to get them out of feeling what they're supposed to feel.
Society does an incredible job at indoctrinating people with the idea that they're not enough.
Yep.
That if they get something, then they will be worth something.
Yeah.
If I get this job, then I will be valuable. If I get this car, then I will get the relationship.
Yep.
If I get fit, then I will be beautiful.
Yep.
That's all a lie.
And then and then all of that trickles down into that's how I get love.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line.
I'll finally be loved.
That's what our soul craves.
Yeah.
That's what it's lost, and that's what it's seeking to get back.
Plot twist, everyone. Love is not something that you need to change yourself to get.
Yeah.
It's something that's always available to you if you choose.
Yeah.
So ask yourself, you know, there was one saying I read that I really loved. It's not our inability to love. It's all the things we hold on to that don't allow us to feel it.
Yeah.
Totally.
Think about that. What are your reasons for you that make you unworthy of love? Why?
So what if this goes back to be born into 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows? What if with all your warts and foibles, just like me, what if you were just perfect the way you are? What if perfection is actual reality? Perfection isn't like, you know, this vision. It's who you actually are, and that it's my wounds and my scars that make me who I am. And that the gift in that wound of being sexually abused is I know what it feels like to be broken.
Yeah.
And I can hold space for people that feel like they're broken. So my wound, you know, we talk about from our greatest wound comes our greatest gold.
Yeah.
And so that wound has allowed me to hold space for thousands, literally thousands of people in my life and be compassionate and understanding and suspend judgment. Like, oh, you deserve that. No, never even crosses my mind. It's like, wow, it must have been bad for you.
I used to think that I would have this black mark on me forever and that I was lesser. I thought I was lesser than everyone else. I'd walk down the street and I felt like everyone had it going on except for me.
Yep.
And I know I'm not alone in that.
Yeah.
Nope.
But I found that I'm really grateful for it's helped me relate to almost anyone because nothing really phases me anymore because I've done things that scare me. I've hurt myself, right?
Yep.
And now when people talk about the things that they were so afraid to talk about, I used to be deathly afraid that people would find out that I would drink myself to sleep every night. You know, I was the pillar of my community, my job. You know, I held everyone up and I was breaking. And I was terrified of that coming out.
Yep.
So when I ended up in rehab, everyone found out that, oh, Ryan has a problem. And it took me for a ride into a really dark place.
Right.
Yep.
And now I'm grateful for it.
Right.
Because just like you said, people that are afraid to talk about those things, I want to talk to them because I can hold space too.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and that's one of the things that helped me because earlier we were talking about not doing it alone, right?
Yep.
These feelings, these fears, these angers have an incredibly isolating effect.
Oh, wow.
And one of the most liberating experiences for me, I was in the complete moment of everyone finding out my social situation went to -10. You know, my life collapsed, right?
Yep.
And everyone was now afraid of me. And I felt more alone than I ever have in my life. And I was in a detox unit. You know, there were no doors on the bathrooms. You couldn't, you know, they were worried you were going to kill yourself. And
Yep.
I remember not knowing where to go, where to sit, but there were all these people sitting down and we were all just sitting there drying out, feeling awful.
Yeah.
And I sat down at this table and they just, you know, there were probably 5 people there. And one of them looked at me and they said, "So what are you in for?" I said, "Well, I went on a 6-day bender and, you know, lost 11 pounds because the only thing I put in my body was alcohol for 6 days. And I threw up on everything that I own and didn't go to work. And they ended up calling my mom and my sister found me in my apartment." And I remember the guy looked at me and he said, "That's it?" I had never felt more accepted in my life. Here all this fear was, and it was crushing me. And he said, "That's it?"
Yep.
And I was like, "What do you mean that's it? I thought my life was over."
Yeah.
And that was really the beginning of my journey in figuring out why I was so afraid.
Yeah.
You know, there's something that I'm sitting with, which is this desire, like the conversations that we've had here to reach and have some kind of impact on as many people as possible. And I'm realizing that not everybody has a story of some horrific abuse, at least that they know of, or some addiction. And knowing that's equally as difficult. Like having the experience that you've had, Jeff, is horrific. I mean, I don't wish that on anybody. And there are people that live in fear for far less reasons.
Yeah.
And I want to include them in this conversation.
For sure.
Because fear is one of those things that, like, it doesn't matter why we have it, it still has the same impact. Like,
What about how am I going to eat this week?
Right, sure.
How am I going to pay rent?
Well, or maybe when they look at their life and their childhoods, they're like, I don't know, there wasn't anything terrible. And I will guarantee that there's still something that's operating in them that they're fearful about.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the piece that I want to touch. I want to make sure that, like, if there's somebody that's listening to this conversation going, oh, these guys have these terrible things, and that's not me. This doesn't apply to me. And I'm like, no, because I'm gonna speak from my own experience. Like I don't have an addiction problem that I went to detox for, and I didn't have this clearly, like, defining experience in my life that, like, destroyed me in some way.
You don't?
In the manner of, like, something that Jeff shared.
Yeah.
Okay, in our specific instances.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like,
but you do have your own.
that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
So if somebody looked at my life, my childhood, from the outside, they would be like, oh my God, that was like
Privilege.
fairy tale. Well, it was privilege, but it was also fairy tale. And that doesn't mean that I don't have all kinds of things operating and an immense amount of fear. And like your thing about food and whatnot. I mean, you know, I suffer from an immense amount of scarcity. And it's not because that exists in my life anywhere. But it is there, and it is a huge driver in how I am in the world.
I really appreciate you bringing that up. I want everyone. My ideal is that I can speak to universal truths, even from my limited perspective in the world. But one thing that I think about is the gravity of what's going on Earth. You know, people live with the fear of a bomb blowing up when they go to the grocery store.
Right.
You know, or their government collapsing, or, you know, and it's part of the human experience.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like, my experience, Jeff's experience, your experience, Ryan, they're all wildly different. And the reality is if there was a way to, like, measure, like, how much fear Jeff has and how much fear you have and how much fear I have, even though the history is totally different, I would venture to guess that if you could quantify it, that my fear is equal to yours in some form or another.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And doing personal work, men's work, couples work, all the stuff. People often compare as like, oh, this guy had this horrible thing happen to me. It's like, well, I didn't ever have that, right? But
I'm that guy.
Yeah,
I can't hold a candle to people who have had guns to their head.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, I can't do that, and I'm not going to try. But I think what you're saying is in the way our bodies react.
Yes.
I think every human deserves to understand the difference between their programming and who they are when they are actually in charge of their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like, again, it's what I was kind of talking about, and this is, I believe, is universal, is that what's happening in your self-talk, and if your fear or your anger, which often comes from fear, and then sadness, right? If you feel like something's missing in your life, right? If you feel like it's not that, I haven't attained this to be loved. It's just like, I kind of got a hole in my heart here, and it's hard for me to connect with people, and I'm alone, and I don't know what to do. And
just don't feel good.
I just don't, is this really what life is all about? That's that's kind of, for me, that's kind of the red flag going, hey, let's take a look at one, possibly what's happened in your life, right? And move through it. So, that's the, and almost everybody has that going on.
Exactly. And
there are very few naturally self-actualized people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's what I wanted to really include in the conversation is that this topic is pervasive throughout.
Yeah.
I mean, man, woman, age, culture. It doesn't matter.
We are at the end of our time today. One thing that we like to do is end each episode with a takeaway and express something we're grateful for. One thing that I love that I learned in school was that the human brain can't hold anger, fear, and gratitude simultaneously. So if you're out there and it feels impossible to think of something you're grateful for, try. Even if it's, I loved what Tim said last episode, even if it's the fact that you got out of bed today, that you're breathing.
Feel the sun on your skin.
That you can feel at all. Find something you're grateful for. The candy bar, the dollar in your pocket, whatever it is, and feel it. Try it. What are you grateful for right now?
For me, in this moment, it's really being able to have a conversation like this, and to share, and to be heard, and to experience. How do I want to label it? I'm less alone.
Yeah,
I'm less alone.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, I know this is going to sound kind of hokey or whatever, but I truly, truly mean this. I'm just so thankful for the pain that I've had in my life. I'm privileged. I've got a lot of unearned privilege for sure. And the pain gave me the chance to crack open and be a human being and be in relationship with people like you. I mean, I could have gone either way, and the ability to hold space and be in relationship with people. I can't, I can't think of anything else that I could be more grateful for.
Yeah.
So,
I'm really grateful you shared your story today.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that I don't feel so alone.
Yeah.
I'm really incredibly grateful for my family. They stuck with me when they didn't know if I was going to live, and I didn't know either.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for the love of my life, Audrey. She's been so patient with me. She had a shirt on this morning that it was the word fear, and it said, face everything and rise. And I know that can be platitudey, right? Oh,
Sure.
great saying. But what I like about it is it changes something that is so debilitating into something empowering. Even if it's the idea of facing it, what does that mean in your life? What would it mean to face your fear? Why does it have so much power over you? Why are you giving it so much power? I'm grateful that I was asked those questions, and I, for the first time in my life, have experienced, I'm still working on it, but I have experienced that sweet light on my cheek on a cold day that is the feeling of accepting myself the way I am. I have tasted that. And I believe that everyone deserves to feel that.
Yep.
So I am incredibly grateful for the people in my life that stuck with me and believed in me when I didn't believe in myself.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Me three.
Thank you both.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
and I
thank
don't
you.
want this to be one episode. I love this is an incredible topic.
Yeah.
Totally.
You know?
I think there's
Yeah.
can
It's,
go in so many directions.
it's huge. Yeah. So love it.
And my one true hope is, as I named in the beginning, that a conversation like this hopefully has an impact, a positive impact on just one person.
Yeah. Yeah. Bless you, men, for doing this. This is beautiful.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Have a great day, everybody.
Take care.